Hey, what's up guys? Calum or Calum's Fish Tanks. In today's video, we're going to be talking all about how to be successful growing mosses in your aquarium. So let's get started. The tips I share today are going to be applicable to almost all mosses. Of course, there are some exceptions that will require different parameters. But to start off, most mosses are easy. Your mosses like Christmas, Java, Weeping Moss, Taiwan Moss, all those are generally easier to grow, but there is harder mosses like Physidens fontanus, all the Physidens moss, Mini Pellia, and these tips are also going to apply to those mosses. So today I'm going to be sharing two really important big tips that are going to lead to so much more success when growing your mosses, as well as a couple smaller ones to help you be more successful with mosses in your aquarium. Now, one of the main things with mosses is you're going to need a lot of flow. Now, I have a video all about flow in the Planet Aquarium, and I'm going to put a link to it up here, I think, and it's really important that you guys watch that. But mosses need so much flow because this is going to help so much with fighting algae as well as keeping them healthy. Now, I have found so much more success with my mosses since I've started using high flow, and that's because with the high flow, it's going to give your mosses a gentle sway, and that'll help stop fine particles and waste from building up in your mosses, causing algae. Mosses are already a slow-growing plant, so algae has all the more reason to grow on them. So if you keep fine particles from building up in your moss, because they are just bushy and they can hold so much nutrients, they're a perfect place for algae to grow, so the flow will stop these from building up, allowing you to get better growth out of your mosses. Now, I would recommend that you put your mosses somewhere where they have a gentle sway and the flow is not too strong, but just so they move a little bit for best growth of your mosses. Alright guys, so let's move on to big tip number 2, and that is temperature. Now, a lot of people keep their aquariums between 75 and 78 degrees, just the typical tropical temperatures, and that is going to lead to your moss growing more leggy and not as bushy. So you want really low temperature, not really low, but between 74 and 68 degrees is where I grow all my moss, and that's how I have found to get the best growth. I find it grows faster in colder temperatures, as well as bushier and less stringy. It's going to keep its more natural form, and this is just going to allow you to get much healthier moss. Now, this isn't to say if you keep your tank at, say, 76 degrees, you're not going to be able to grow moss, but it's just more likely that it's going to have stringier growth and not grow as dense as if you were to keep it somewhere under 74 degrees. Now, those were my two main tips, but now let's get into some more smaller tips to give you some more success when growing moss. Now, when you're placing moss, rather on your rocks or your wood, I've never tried to grow it in the substrate, but I've heard people can. I'd recommend either using super glue or string. I don't know if I'd recommend fishing line, because fishing line, for me, takes a really long time to go away. I would recommend using super glue or string like I mentioned, and I recommend to place it super thinly. Do not pad down thick clumps of it because the bottoms will end up rotting away, ending up killing your whole moss, or just having a bunch of chunks floating all over your tank, which you don't really want. Now, it's also super important to frequently trim your mosses, maybe once every 2 weeks or so, to stop the bottoms from getting shaded out and rotting away, so you don't end up killing all your mosses. So it's super important to trim your mosses frequently. I also wouldn't recommend keeping your moss with larger fish. I'd recommend keeping it with smaller community fish. Now, shrimp are great for any tank you have moss in. Your shrimp will love the moss, they'll find so much food in it, and your moss will love the shrimp because they're removing all those particles from the moss. They will just end up growing algae. So if you're going to keep moss, I recommend trying to keep some shrimp, like either a monos or cherries or something along those lines. And for the last tip is with moss, Siamese algae eaters are known to eat moss when they get to larger sizes, so just be careful of that because you can work so hard to get a bunch of moss and then your Siamese algae eater gets hungry and decides to eat it all on you. So be careful when getting them. I recommend getting a Siamese algae eater and then returning it when it gets big and getting a new one again so they will not eat your moss. Anyways, guys, that about does it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like if you found it helpful, and subscribe if you want more Planet Tank content. But anyways, guys, this was Caleb's Fish Tanks. Peace.